When I was 21, I spent a lot of time home alone in my parents' house, which backed up to a serene little pond. Across the pond was a small town park, and our neighbors were pretty spread out, making the area feel upscale and private. My parents were well off, and we had multiple homes, so I often found myself alone during the summer while I was in college. One summer night, I settled into my favorite sunroom, where the cold breeze wafted through the open windows, making it the coziest spot in the house. I was engrossed in my favorite show when I suddenly heard splashing sounds from the pond. At first, I thought it might be a duck or a goose, but the noise persisted, growing louder and more intense. Curiosity piqued. I turned down the volume and leaned closer to the window, straining to listen. What I heard sent a chill down my spine. This splashing sounded too heavy to be a bird. It was as if someone was in the water. I cautiously stepped out into the dark, the darkness of the backyard swallowing me whole. Just as I did, I began to hear a deep humming mingled with the splash. Someone was definitely swimming in the pond, trespassing on our property. I flipped on the lights to the backyard, illuminating just a small portion of the water, and the splashing and humming abruptly stopped. Whoever was out there had spotted me. For a moment, I considered what it might be one of the neighbors, though it seems a little strange since nobody ever swam in that pond. Unsure and a bit freaked out, I decided against confronting whoever it was. I hurried back inside, locking the door behind me and texted my brother, hoping for some reassurance. But my anxiety grew as I tried to focus on the TV. The sound of the night outside were unsettling. Suddenly I thought I heard a movement on the deck. My heart raced as I fumbled for the remote and switched off the TV. The room plunged into darkness, and as my eyes adjusted, I froze. Someone was outside, breathing heavily right next to the window. Panic surged through me, and instinctively I laid flat on the couch, trying to remain hidden. In that suffocating silence, a deep voice cut through the darkness, saying, "I see you." My stomach dropped, and without thinking, I blurted out. I said, "Paul, is that you?" Paul was one of our neighbors, and I clung to the hope that maybe it was just a prank, but silence followed, broken only by the sound of footsteps retreating into the night. I was terrified. I stayed hidden for what felt like an eternity before the urge to check the doors overtook me. I leaped off the couch and dashed to the front door. It was locked. The side door was secure too, but my heart raced as I texted my entire family, frantically explaining what was happening. My dad urged me to turn on the backyard lights and check for any intruders, insisting I had to protect the house. Gathering my courage, I flicked the backyard lights on and stepped onto the deck, the knife clutched tightly in my hand. The yard was eerily quiet, but as I scanned the ground, my blood ran cold. I found wet footprints, still glistening, leading away from the pond. I followed the trail around the side of the deck, my pulse pounding in my ears. Then I saw it, something straight out of a nightmare. A man's head peeked over the edge of the deck, his eyes locking onto mine with a chilling intensity. The moment we made eye contact, he turned away as if waiting for me to come closer. My heart was racing. I bolted back inside and called 911 before even informing my parents. I locked myself in as adrenaline was coursing through me, anxiously waiting for them to arrive. When they finally showed up, relief washed over me. They asked if we had any enemies or troublesome neighbors while conducting a quick sweep of the property. I shut every window tightly that night, turning on the air conditioning for added security. As I drifted off to sleep, sunlight streamed through the windows. The next morning, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread. I was grateful that whatever or whoever had invaded our space hadn't returned, leaving us with the unsettling mystery of who that man could have been. I have a dog that I walk 3 times a day, in the morning, the afternoon, and finally at night. We always take the same route through our driveway, which leads to the parking lot of the condominium complex where we live. I've grown accustomed to our late-night walks, and it's never posed a problem until one fateful evening. It was a typical night as I embarked on our final walk, flashlight in hand, since the parking lot is pitch black. I was listening to music with one AirPod in, wanting to stay aware of my surroundings. As we approached the parking lot, I noticed something odd. A faint voice echoed from ahead of us. At first, I shrugged it off, lost in my own world of music. But then I paused, pulled out my AirPod, and strained to listen. The voice came again, more distinct this time, but I still couldn't see anyone around. Despite my unease, I made the reckless decision to continue walking forward, telling myself it was all in my head. Yet, an unsettling feeling gnawed at me. I stepped again, this time next to a row of parked cars, flashlights sweeping the area. And then I heard it. A muffled voice sounding like a child whispering, saying, "Help!" My heart dropped as I heard that, and panic was coursing through me as I searched frantically with my flashlight. I was certain that the voice had come from among the cars, but there was no child in sight. No one at all, just me and my dog, who seemed blissfully unaware as he sniffed around some bushes. Then it came again, 3 more times. Each time it was coming from my left, where the cars loomed ominously. The panic intensified. I had to make sense of this. My dog's ears perked up, his gaze fixated in the same direction as I was looking, and that realization sent a chill down my spine. The voice didn't sound entirely like a child. It was unsettling, a bizarre blend of an adult and a child's tone. It was muffled, as if someone was trying to call out from the inside of a car or hiding in the shadows. And there was no urgency in the way it was spoken, just a flat haunting repetition. Feeling trapped in that eerie moment, I bolted straight home, my heart racing. I rushed to explain to my mom what had happened, but she was just as puzzled as I was. I suggested we call the police on the off chance that someone was truly in distress, but she dismissed the idea as unnecessary. My mind was flooded with questions. Why was the voice so muffled? Was there someone in one of the cars, concealed from view? Or was it something darker lurking, waiting for me to come closer? To this day, the memory leaves me feeling profoundly disturbed. I still think about that moment standing in the dark, flashlight shaking in my hand, and the chilling whispers that echoed in the night. The parking lot, once a familiar space, transformed into a realm of fear and uncertainty. I never discovered the truth behind that voice, and the mystery still haunts me. What I'm about to share is the reason why my parents moved away from a house that had been in the family for 3 generations. For most of my life, I struggled with depression, a heavy weight that made me feel useless and alone. I spent countless hours in my room, isolated in a wooded area, surrounded by trees on 3 sides and a forest that separated us from our neighbors. My room was large for a child, located in the back corner of the house, with 2 walls lined with windows that faced the dense woods. It felt like a prison, especially for a kid who was already afraid of the dark. The strange occurrences began when I was around 10 years old, in the 5th grade. At that age, it was deemed unacceptable to crawl into my parents' bed after a nightmare. Yet, I was often accused of having an active imagination. My nightlight had various color settings, and I preferred a calming red light, which was what I was always feeling asleep to. Until one night, I woke up abruptly in the middle of the night, something I rarely did. I was exhausted and quickly drifted back to sleep, but I noticed my nightlight was no longer red. It had changed colors. I brushed it off, thinking I must have imagined it. A week later, I woke again to find my nightlight had switched to another color. I was confused this time. I asked my parents if they had been messing with me. They looked at me bewildered, claiming they hadn't touched it at all. They suggested that it must just be a glitch, which I accepted for a while. But then one morning, I discovered that my nightlight was completely unplugged and lying on the floor. When I asked about it, my parents shrugged it off, and my dad insisted I was too old for a nightlight anyway. A few days later, my nightlight vanished altogether. I know my parents were hiding something from me. This led to a huge fight between us, each side accusing the other of stashing it away. I was devastated. How could they lie about something so trivial? After that confrontation, things settled down for about a week. But then the real deal, the real nightmare, began. For 3 consecutive nights, I woke up for no apparent reason. Each time, I felt a deep sense of dread creeping over me. After the 4th night of waking in a cold sweat, I decided to stay awake and figure out what was happening. That's when I heard it. Faint rustling noises coming from my closet. My heart raced as I called out to my parents, desperate for them to believe me, but they brushed it off. My dad even checked the closet, only to find old toys and posters. The next 4 nights were pure torture. I woke up each time paralyzed with fear, listening to the rustling in my closet. I finally begged my parents to take me seriously. My dad, frustrated, dragged me back to the closet, determined to prove there was nothing there. He started tossing toys around, clearing space, yelling at me all the while. But then, as he ripped a poster from the wall, both my parents froze, their faces drained of color. Behind that poster was a gaping hole in the wall. My mother screamed as my dad grabbed a flashlight to peer into the darkness. The hole was far too deep to see where it led, so he dashed outside to inspect the house. What he found sent chills down my spine, a small hole in the ground at the base of the house. So we started digging, revealing a hidden passageway from the woods directly into my room. That night, my mother and I fled to my aunt's house, shaken to our core. We moved out shortly after, leaving behind a home that had once felt like a sanctuary. The experience still haunts me, a dark shadow in my mind that I dread confronting. My parents refuse to talk about it, perhaps feeling some guilt for not believing me. It's terrifying to think that a stranger might have been in my room every night for over a month. I'll never know what they wanted, but I've learned one thing. If your kids come to you with something that sounds outlandish or abnormal, believe them, because you never know what might be lurking in the shadows. My name is Leo, and to be honest, I'm feeling a bit lost in life right now. Without diving too deep, my family situation is a mess, and for the past 3 years, I've been trying to stay as far away from home as possible. My close friends from high school are changing in ways that do not resonate with me at all, and my hometown feels devoid of any opportunity. As I approach my senior year in college, I find myself grappling with uncertainty about what the future holds. Last year, I found myself in Berlin, searching for something, maybe a sense of belonging or direction. I wandered into a bar called Roya, enjoying